Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Twitter, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. Great to be back. Missed the last technically 3 of the last 4 shows and didn't do any of them live. The one show I did do last Tuesday, so a bit of a weird schedule. I was on vacation, so again, it kind of messed up the flow of how I normally do the show, but I'm back in studio, back on a Monday with tons to talk about in the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, both of which, by the way, have one team leading 3-0, as we all know. No team in the history of the NBA has ever come back from a 3-0 deficit. Going to talk Mavs in just a second. I tried to tell y'all for the last couple months that this is one of the biggest threats to win the NBA title, and they're a win away. Again, barring a literally historic choke job, which I don't see happening, they're going to be getting to the finals and be 4 wins away from a second title in franchise history. Talk about the Boston Celtics. So people making a lot out of, oh my gosh, 3 rounds, the Celtics have gotten a massive injury break with Miami and Jimmy Butler, with Cleveland, Donovan Mitchell, and with the Pacers and Tyrese Halliburton. This isn't going to be carving up the context. We do that on Wednesdays, but it's carving up the context adjacent in terms of how we will view the Celtics one way or the other in about 2 to 3 weeks. I'll discuss that in about 10 to 15 minutes. Also, the very odd criticism of Caitlin Clark. I find it strange and in an odd way pseudo-political. Going to discuss that later on the show. Also, listen, Luka and Kyrie, as I'm about to talk about in a second, are freaking awesome. They're not better than Steph Curry and Klay Thompson historically. Let's pump the brakes on that. Oh, yes, I'm the biased Warriors fan, but I'll detail that in 30 minutes. And at the end of today's show, paid tribute to the late, but no question, great Bill Walton, who passed away today. Before we get into anything, though, any sports topics, 2 things I did want to mention. First and foremost, the most important thing I'll mention today is the fact that it is Memorial Day. So on this day, I wanted to take some time to commemorate and to to pay tribute to all the incredibly brave men and women who've given their lives to preserve this country. Listen, this is a nation that is certainly not without its flaws, but it is a country of opportunity, of freedoms that a lot of other countries don't get. Freedom of speech being at the top of the list, at least in my book. And so, listen, we don't get any of those things. I saw a post today. Many of you know that I'm a Christian, so I follow a pastor named Max Lucado. And he put a great post this morning on Instagram talking about how we literally don't have anything. And he broke it down better than I did. But we literally have nothing when it comes to freedom as Americans without these incredibly brave men and women. And listen, the freedom isn't free, as the old cliche goes. We've heard that a million times, but it's a true cliche. Maybe you shouldn't even call it a cliche. So just want to pay tribute to all the incredibly brave men and women, and shout out to their families. Praying for y'all. What is no question a tough day, but definitely want to pay tribute to their sacrifice on this Memorial Day. Before I get into Dallas and Minnesota, I also did want to mention, and we're going to discuss this because it's Memorial Day. I feel like it'd be somewhat inappropriate to be in like a celebratory mood. But on Wednesday's show, we're going to celebrate the fact that after 3.5 years on YouTube and Carving It Up, 4.5 years of the show being in existence, we have officially hit a massive milestone. 1,000 subscribers. We reached that this morning on Carving It Up. Actually, a funny story. Thanks to the help of 2 friends of my sister. So shout out to both y'all. I really appreciate it. But 1,000 subscribers. We reached that today. So thank you out there to everybody who supported the show since day one. Those who are new to the show, those who've been supporting for any amount of time. The fact of the matter is I'm not on ESPN, not on Fox. I'm not an established brand in the national media space. And yet and still you took time out of your day to give this show a shot and to even go so far as to hit the big subscribe button to commit to watching this content. Can't tell you how much that means to me. Honest to God, I can't tell you how much that means to me. So we're going to celebrate on Wednesday's show. Again, it's Memorial Day. I want to, I don't feel like it'd be totally appropriate to do a celebration on a day like today. But Wednesday, we're going to be pulling out all the stops to celebrate 1,000 subscribers. So definitely going to enjoy this. And give a big shout out to everybody who's subscribed. Listen, by the way, even if you haven't subscribed, it's never too late to join the party. Big red subscribe button down there. Hit that. And you can become part of the Carving It Up family. We greatly appreciate it. We'll enjoy it. We'll celebrate on Wednesday, but kind of like and when an athlete gets an accomplishment or wins, as may be the case tonight, a conference finals, it's always like, yeah, we'll celebrate it now, but it's on to the next goal. It's on to the next journey. That's where my mindset's going to be, and I can't do it without you, the audience. So I greatly, greatly appreciate y'all's love and support getting us to 1,000 subscribers. Appreciate it greatly. We got some comments here. Patrick, greetings. Glad to see you back and live on a beautiful Monday. Hope everyone stayed safe in the midst of severe tornado weather upon Sunday night. Shout out to you, Patrick. And as you see right there, new articles. Patrick's been putting out the articles like crazy, y'all. So check out this stuff on the Grid Network's YouTube channel. Jeff, what's up, Jeff? Bryson the man, I appreciate that. Give me my theme music. That's for carving up the context, but nonetheless, I greatly appreciate the support, Jeff. No question. So let's talk about sports. But first, Western Conference Finals, Dallas Mavericks win last night by a final score of 116-107 to take a commanding 3-games-to-none lead. And as we know in NBA history, no team has ever come back from a 3-0 deficit. The Heat came close last year, the Celtics came close last year, but the Heat were able to snuff them out in Game 7 in Boston. So this series is over. That goes without saying. But Dallas doing what they've done in this year's playoffs has surprised a lot of people. Like, man, the West is stacked, at least relative to the East. The East is about as weak. This year's Eastern Conference is about one of the weakest conferences, divisions, whatever the case may be, that I've ever seen in sports in my life. It's bad. I'll talk about the Celtics in about 10 to 12 minutes. But out West, oh my God. Defending champion Nuggets, this young, up-and-coming Oklahoma City team, the Timberwolves, who we're seeing doing their thing in this year's postseason, the Phoenix Suns, hey, listen, it is Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, the Lakers with LeBron and AD, the Mavericks, and the Clippers if Kawhi's healthy, and up and down the board. Wait, Dallas is going to make the finals out of this loaded field? I mean, it's not like stunning, but to some, it's, man, I didn't see that coming. Listen, full disclosure, before the year started, this is a bad pick, but I picked the Warriors to win the finals. I didn't back off that pick entirely because I believe in pick integrity. When you make your pick, gosh darn it, you stay with that pick. Otherwise, you lose credibility, in my mind. But I backed away. I shouldn't say backed away. I said toward the end of the season, they're darn sure not the favorites. I'm going to stick with my pick because that's my pick and that's my team. But I was leaning Denver Nuggets. But I said coming into this year's playoffs, if the Denver Nuggets do not win the Western Conference, it will be because the Dallas Mavericks did. Now, I thought the Mavericks could potentially beat Denver in the Western Conference Finals, given how the bracket had shaken itself out. And like, Bryson, why would you make a claim like that? By the way, I said before the playoffs, I did my top 10 teams in the NBA. I had Denver 1, Boston 2, Dallas 3rd. Turns out I might have actually underrated Dallas because they're going to be literally one of the last 2 teams left. So by definition, they're higher than 3. It's because the reason I believe in the Dallas Mavericks, who I did not believe in coming into this season. I certainly didn't believe in them after the Kyrie Irving trade. More on Kyrie in just a second, because I've been very critical of him throughout the course of his career. I'm not going to run from that now or act like I didn't make those comments. But Dallas over the last 35 games, what the Dallas Mavericks have done is boast the number 1 opponent points per game. Boast the number 1 opponent field goal percentage. Basically, the lowest percentage shot against any defense in the NBA over the last 35 games of the regular season was caused by the Dallas Mavericks. They improved their defense. The Gafford trade, PJ Washington, Luka. I talked about this the first round against the Clippers. Luka was putting the clamps on Paul George, on Kawhi Leonard, on Kyrie. I'm not on Kyrie Irving, on James Harden. Luka's committed more to the defensive end. Kyrie, in spurts, has committed to the defensive end. Gafford gives him an interior presence. You have Washington, who's a long, rangy defender, can knock down the corner threes like a longer, younger PJ Tucker to a certain degree. Jason Kidd, who I was skeptical of before he took the Dallas job, after year 1, I'm like, I'm sold. That's the guy. Mid-season trades, committing more to the defensive end, making the adjustments under Jason Kidd is why the Dallas Mavericks are in the position that they're in. For the record, speaking of record, in the last 35 games leading up to the playoffs, Dallas had the second best record to the team they're about to face the finals, the Boston Celtics. They've been doing this. Oh, again, I'm not a big believer in tiny sample sizes as being what defines you. Right? Like, you know, I don't like if the Clippers, remember when the Clippers went on that nice little run in December, January, didn't buy into it. A, because of previous history. B, it's too small of a sample size. Darn near half the season. That's a pretty big sample size. By the way, at the end of the season is where the Dallas Mavericks, after making those trades and after sort of adjusting their offensive philosophy, as I've talked about in this show, with Luka Doncic and the Mavericks being 10-0 when Luka's usage rate is 30% or below, that's why they're here. And that's why when you have an offense that does cater more to the others around Luka, Luka's still going to get his. He's one of the 3 best players in basketball, and I don't think that's deniable. But when you have an offense that caters more to everybody else with Luka as the driver of the engine, you also get the best out of Kyrie Irving, who we've all known. When Kyrie's number 2, he's one of the clutchest players in the NBA. And we could show you some clutch stats from last night as well as from the series, okay? So fourth quarter last night, and that game was in the balance, man. Like, that was Minnesota and Edwards dunks on the entire city of Dallas in the third quarter. Ant has 2 amazing playoff dunks, by the way. It's crazy. And the Timberwolves are making this 15-3 run, and we're like, hey, Minnesota may steal this game, and now we got a series. And what do Luka and Kyrie Irving do? Let's put up the graphic right here. Luka, Kyrie Irving scored 21 points in the fourth quarter last night. 21 by 2 guys. The Minnesota Timberwolves scored 20. Luka and Kyrie outscore the Timberwolves in the fourth quarter by themselves. Throughout the course of the series, let's show what Luka and Kyrie have done in the fourth quarter. They've averaged 19 points per game. Look at the shooting splits. 56% for the field. Good Lord Almighty. 69% from 3. Luka and Kyrie combined in the fourth quarter of the conference finals. 12 assists and only 4 turnovers. They've been clutch. They've hit every big shot. They've gotten other guys involved. They're not turning the basketball over. And the efficiency's off the freaking charts. So am I surprised it's 3-0? A little, because I picked Dallas in 6 coming in this thing. But am I surprised that Luka's been the best player in the series with respect to Ant Edwards and that Kyrie's outperformed Cat? That doesn't surprise me at all. Am I surprised that Jason Kidd has significantly outcoached Chris Finch in this series, who he's gotten better this year, but I've always been a little skeptical of Chris Finch dating back to that 2022 playoff run where they blew a bunch of fourth quarter leads to the Grizzlies. This is what the Mavericks have done. I did want to address, because we know Luka's great. Like, if you don't think Luka Doncic is a great player, and at this point in time, one of the 3 best players of the basketball, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. Kyrie Irving, though, is a more of a mixed bag. And boy, does he have a bag. We've always known that. With Kyrie, because I'm seeing a, not revisionist history, but I think an incorrect way of viewing how the last, what are we going to give it, 5 or 6 years went for Kyrie and compared to how this year's going, which couldn't be going better for Kyrie Irving, is that, hey, now the media is giving Kyrie Irving his props. He's always been great. He's just gone to a situation that suits him. That's partly true because now, for the first time since Cleveland, LeBron James, and Kyrie, to his credit, apologized years ago to LeBron for leaving him, being like, hey, this leading a team thing ain't as easy as you made it look in Cleveland, LeBron. So they made up. Yes, he has a reliable number 1 star, the clear face of the franchise, Luka Doncic, the way LeBron was in Cleveland, as opposed to KD, who, while he's great, I think will always be viewed as great, but like a Moses Malone sort of, right? Historically. Kyrie has that, but let's be intellectually honest here. Kyrie's matured. Matter of fact, Kyrie Irving's matured a lot. Not even just the vaccine controversy in Brooklyn, because Kyrie wasn't the first guy to come out against the vaccine, whatever. He was the guy who a year and a half ago promoted the anti-Semitic documentary. We know there were some issues he had with teammates in the past. There were a lot of problems in Brooklyn. The Boston Celtics guys could not stand him when it comes to his leadership, and he had some bad playoff runs. Those things all happen. But what has also happened is that Kyrie, who I've never viewed Kyrie Irving as a bad human being. I don't think most people have viewed him as that. What he has been, though, is a guy maybe trying to find himself, but to a certain degree at the detriment of the Dallas Mavericks, or not the Dallas Mavericks, or to the Brooklyn Nets, and certainly to the Boston Celtics, who he very well is going to face in about a week and a half. It's the fact that this man, who's been in the NBA, this is his 13th year in the NBA, has matured, has grown to the point now where the Mavericks are looking to him to be like, Luka's great. Not to say Luka isn't a great leader. Kyrie's kind of the leader of that team. Because he's been on a lot of playoff runs. He's won a championship. He hit one of the biggest shots in NBA history against my Warriors. Don't remind me. He's been to finals. He's been to conference. He's been there and he's done that more than anybody in that Dallas Mavericks squad. They look to him for leadership. They didn't do that in Brooklyn. They didn't. They didn't do that in Boston. And when they did, it usually went poorly. And so props to Kyrie Irving for maturing, for understanding what his role. Kyrie Irving understood. When I'm the number 2 to a more skilled and certainly a better player above me, Luka Doncic, LeBron James, and Cleveland, we can beat anybody. And all of a sudden, the Dallas Mavericks 5 wins away from an NBA title, and Kyrie's 5 wins away from a second ring. So I think we don't need to do a revisionist history on Kyrie Irving, and we also don't need to rewrite history on Kyrie Irving. Those things in the past happened, but what has also happened is a maturity, is a growth by a very smart guy. I've never questioned Kyrie Irving's intellect or intelligence by any stretch of the imagination. He's grown. He's gotten better, and he's now with the franchise. He's with the number 2 guy that suits his greatest skills. So listen, Dallas being up 3 in this series is somewhat surprising. I thought Dallas would win the series in 6, but listen, Minnesota led in the fourth quarter of all 3 games. That guy number 77 in Luka Doncic, and that guy number 11. I think is he still number 11? I can't believe I didn't notice that. But that guy wearing number 11 in Dallas as well has been absolutely phenomenal, along with Luka Doncic. So the Mavericks lead 3-0, and they are going to the finals. Look at some comments real quick, because after this, I do want to touch on Ant Edwards briefly, and I'll discuss this more at length whenever the series ends, because the Timberwolves aren't going to come back. But let's look at the comment section. Jeff says, congrats on 1K, Cowherd Jr. I appreciate that. Listen, Colin Cowherd is one of my idols in this space, and so I appreciate the comparison, because I think he's one of the best ever. Yeah, Patrick, crazy stats for Luka and Kyrie. Sheesh. Luka getting Rudy on a switch in Game 2 is classic. How's he the 4-time Defensive Player of the Year? Patrick, I've been asking that question since the show's existed. So, not the 4-time, because he just won his 4th. Patrick, Kyrie has shown maturity and poise since arriving in Dallas. It's a beautiful thing to witness. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Smart people learn from their mistakes and grow. That's what Kyrie's done. Stubborn people stick with them to their own detriment and the detriment of those around him. Kyrie has not done that. So kudos to him. Briefly, we'll talk Rudy Gobert when this series is over. It's a good thing Game 2. It's a good thing we didn't do a show after Game 2. It's a good thing. We'll talk Rudy Gobert when the series is over, because I really want to discuss him. Because I said, just briefly on Rudy, and then we'll get to Ant, that in Game 7, when I thought Rudy was excellent against the Denver Nuggets and didn't outplay Jokic, but made things tough on Jokic, who had a good statistical output, but the impact wasn't necessarily there, certainly in the second half of that game. Was leading the playoffs on plus-minus. But I said I need a larger, just what I talked about earlier with the Mavericks, a larger body of work to completely change my opinion. Now, I will if I get that large body of work, but I need to see it. And the Mavericks did what the Nuggets should have done, and that's get Rudy Gobert on the perimeter, and you saw what Luka did to him in Game 2. To Ant Edwards, briefly, then we'll discuss the Boston Celtics getting the injury breaks. So this, to me, is a perfect representation of one of the biggest things that I hate about sports media, is the build a guy up or a woman up, talk about Caitlin Clark later, to tear them down. Just a week ago, literally a week ago, because a week ago today was the day after the Timberwolves beat the Nuggets in Game 7. Is Ant Edwards, hey, could he be the best player in the world? He is the second coming of Michael Jordan. To which Ant Edwards literally does a press conference. Stop comparing me to Jordan. Stop doing it. Yes, my game is similar, and I talked about that last week on the show, the only show I did last week. Like, from a stylistic standpoint, I get that, because it feels Jordan is nostalgic and it feels close to home, and Kobe gave us that, and now Ant Edwards is giving us that from a swagger and a confidence and a game perspective, but it's not fair to the kid, and I've said that from the jump. Now you have Anthony Edwards, who struggled in the fourth quarter of the series, who's been vastly outplayed by Luka and has been outplayed by Kyrie Irving as well. And now it's all, Can't get the job done. Yep. Jordan would have won this series. Michael Jordan, he... Okay. When Michael Jordan was 22, he was a great player in his rookie season, but the Bulls did nothing. Now, not necessarily Jordan's fault. They were, after all, as dubbed in The Last Dance, the traveling cocaine circus. It was a mess. He inherited in Chicago, similar to what LeBron got in Cleveland. And the difference was the Bulls actually put a good roster around him. Unlike what they were able to do in LeBron's first stint in Cleveland, that's neither here nor there. And Anthony Edwards is 22 years old. He's 22 years old. He's about 5 years, literally, like a half decade away from his prime. By the time Anthony Edwards gets his prime, LeBron will be gone. Steph and KD might be gone. Giannis will be out of his prime. Jokic will... We got a long ways to get before we start criticizing this guy for losing to what I said coming to the series was a better team. He sweeps... Listen, the Suns were a horribly constructed roster. I picked them to win that series. That's on me. They were a horribly constructed roster. But he swept Kevin Durant in round 1 and played Jokic to a draw and beat his team in round 2 after trailing 3-2 and won 3 out of 4 games in Denver. So we're just going to ignore that now. That's not to say we shouldn't accurately assess the fact that Anthony Edwards has not been great in this series. The shooting percentage isn't great. Again, the legs clearly, people don't like this when people say this, but it's true. Watch the games. Don't just look at stat sheets. Anthony Edwards is tired out there. He is. It's like, oh, he's 22. He should be. It's the first time he's won a deep playoff run in his life. Starts playing basketball this season, or training camp starts in September, and he's still playing on Memorial Day. Like, it's been a long season for him, again, for everybody here, but especially for a guy like Ant, who's not used to this. Tatum's used to it. Luka's used to it. Kyrie's used to it. Tyrese Halliburton, the Pacers, maybe not so much. Siakam is, I guess, but this is a new experience for him. It's an adjustment. And when you do have to come back from down 20 in a Game 7 on the road against the champs, that's going to take a little bit out of you. Meanwhile, Dallas had an extra day of rest. Again, Luka's been to the conference finals. Kyrie's been to the NBA finals a few times. They've been there. They've done that. So the idea that we should just crush Anthony Edwards. Jordan was a year removed from UNC at Anthony Edwards' age. Like, people, believe it or not, Michael Jordan was not projected to be the GOAT when he came in the NBA. He wasn't even the first overall pick in his own draft. I feel like our view of Michael Jordan, whether you think I think LeBron's the GOAT, but Jordan's a very close second. You can make a valid case for both. We can discuss that another time. But I think this false view of who Jordan was, in that we only really count 6 years of his career and kind of ignore the rest and transpose that onto a guy whose game, just because his game is similar, and the guy literally, it's not like Anthony Edwards said, hey, look out, NBA, Anthony Edwards is here, and I'm going to be not just the face of the league, which he's going to be someday if he has, if he hasn't already, but I'm going to be the greatest player of all time. Well, then it'd be different. He literally does the opposite, goes to me and says, guys, stop comparing me to MJ. Stop. And then now we're tearing him down. It's a broken form, which, listen, if something's broken, it can be fixed in a lot of instances, but it's a broken form of how we view basketball, how we view sports sometimes, that because a guy isn't exactly who he is, what his ceiling is projected to be, because he isn't already that instantly, then he's no good. I don't know. It's, again, and some of that applies to Caitlin Clark. I'll talk about that later in the show. I just hate the view of Anthony Edwards right now. It really bothers me. Let's see what we got in the comments here. Yeah, Jeff. Boom. Tell him, Bryson, Jordan never won nothing without Scotty. Patrick, he's Ant-Man, not Jumpman. Got to let him create his own path. If the Wolves go out Tuesday night, they'll rip him to shreds. Braun at 22 took a bad Cavs team against the prime Spurs. Good point, Patrick. And listen, I'm not even trying to vote LeBron here, but, just saying. Jeff, exactly. The Ant-Man hate is ridiculous to get to where he's at right now. Western Conference Finals at 22 and beat the defending champions is already enough for his age. And again, Patrick sort of alluded to it, and you're right as well, Jeff, that this doesn't happen in NBA history. It just does. We don't have guys who are barely old enough to drink leading teams to championships. That's just not how it works. Jordan, let's see. Jordan was drafted in 84. He won his, it took Jordan 7 years. It took LeBron 9 years. It took Steph 6 years. It took Shaq, was it 9? It took Shaq 9 years. Like, it's a process. Again, you can say Kobe, but he had Shaq. Like, we all view as great as Kobe was. I think Kobe's the 4th greatest player ever. But Shaq was clearly the best player on those Lakers teams. Like, and Kobe was awesome, but Shaq was on something else in the early 2000s when the Lakers three-peated. So it's, again, I say it so often. I've said it a lot recently, but in sports, in politics, in entertainment, we so often just disregard history and act like what is happening right now is the only thing that has ever happened in the history of the world. We have to judge it as that, when that's not it. So, I don't know. Has Ant Edwards been great in this series? No. Has he been bad in this series? No, he's not been bad. Cat's been bad. Cat's shooting like 14% from 3 and 28% from the field is a big. Like, that's bad. Ant has not been bad. I mean, Ant was the only reason that was even a game. So, just saying. Patrick, biased MJ fans won't bring up the 4-12. No, they will not, Patrick. In the first round, he was getting swept by the Bucks, Sixers, Celtics. Old sports media pundits will always defend MJ because they still view him as the GOAT. It's okay to defend MJ. It is. It's not okay to say this guy is going to be MJ. The guy says, stop comparing me to MJ. The media in return says no. Then when he has a failure that MJ was not even good enough to experience at his age, we're going to crush him. It's a broken form of media, in my opinion. My man Phillips got the brooms. He texted me that last night. He texted the brooms. Yeah, it's if the Timberwolves get a game, I won't be shocked. Even if they get 2, I mean, if they push it to 6, I wouldn't be shocked. But yeah, it's over. Now, the series that is going to be a sweep is the Boston Celtics and the Indiana Pacers. It's going to end tonight. Boston's going to sweep Indiana 4-0. And we'll go into the finals. It's funny. I said coming into the playoffs, I said Boston should not have more than 2 losses on their resume heading into the Eastern Conference Finals. Looks like they're going to have only 2 heading into the NBA Finals. And again, is the injuries to Jimmy Butler in round 1, Donovan Mitchell in round 2, Tyrese Halliburton in round 3, the best player on the 3 teams the Celtics have played to this point, do those factor into the Celtics winning? Duh, of course. There's no question about it. But first and foremost, I would argue, okay, Boston would beat them anyway. The Heat would give them, the Heat beat them last year, but I think Boston, with the addition of Holiday, Porzingis was healthy through most of that series. The Celtics would win. In my mind, they definitely beat Cleveland. They were on the way to beating Cleveland when Donovan Mitchell was healthy. And the Pacers, again, should it really be 2-1 Pacers? Sure. I mean, again, Rick Carlisle, who I love, really butchered the end of game 1 with not fouling Jaylen Brown when Jaylen Brown hits the tying 3. Like, there's a lot of areas where the Pacers have really shot themselves in the foot. I said this toward the end of the Cleveland series, so I guess this is a week ago or 2 weeks ago when they were about to gentleman sweep Cleveland, and this was before Halliburton got hurt for Indiana. If the Boston Celtics do what they're supposed to, even if those guys are healthy, certainly when those guys are out, and that's take care of Miami quickly, take care of Cleveland quickly, take care of Indiana quickly, and lose the finals. I'm not saying we should crush them for it, but it's Dallas went through I know it's the Clippers, but it was still Paul George. Harden, that's a different story. But Ty Lue coached Clippers. Like, the Clippers are not a bad basketball team. They're just abysmal come playoff time. They took out the 1 seed, Thunder, led by a guy who many thought should have been MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Then they may have swept or gentlemen swept. We'll see what happens. The Timberwolves, led by Anthony Edwards, who is coming to take his spot amongst the best players in the NBA. Like, they went through a war. You would think they'd be a little, tired, would have, some flesh taken off them. You get through the playoffs without outside the Porzingis injury, relatively healthy. You take care of business, and all that's losing the finals despite being the fresher and better starting 5 team. I don't believe in asterisks in sports. I don't. Unless you're the 2017 Astros, I do not believe in asterisks in sports. If the Celtics go on, however, if the Celtics go on to take care of Indiana, which they will, and win the championship, presumably against the Dallas Mavericks, then I don't want to hear anything about their playoff run. Because we have been asking, and this sort of leads me in my next point, we have been asking Tatum and Brown, man, Jaylen Brown making $300 million. Tatum's going to. Like, when are you going to show up? You got the roster. You got Drew Holiday, and we'll see if Porzingis comes back, and Al Horford and Derek White. And you got these guys. When are you going to come up big? Eastern Conference is weak. You're supposed to win. If they win, they should be given their due share. Because they will have taken down again, it's going to be Dallas, a Luka Doncic, who I think we agree across the board. I would think we agree across the board is better than Jason Tatum, and a Kyrie who's playing his best basketball in the playoffs in 8 years. And Jason Kidd, who's absolutely a better coach than Joe Mazzulla. I think Celtics fans would agree with me there. So it reminds me, part of the reason I'm defending Boston a little bit is it reminds me a little bit, it wasn't as severe back then, but it reminds me a little bit of my 2015 Warriors when my Dubs won the title that year, when it was, I forget, I think Drew Holiday was beat up for a lot of round 1 against the Pelicans. It's like, bro, we're going to beat the Pelicans. We won 67 games. They snuck into the playoffs. The Warriors were going to beat the Pelicans. Nonetheless, Drew Holiday out. Round 2 against the Grizzlies. Mike Conley in and out of the lineup of that series. I think Zach Randolph may or may not have dealt with injuries. Grizzlies weren't fully healthy. Western Conference Finals. I don't remember. Houston was missing like Patrick Beverly, and somehow they held that against the Warriors, even though Pat Bev has never been an impact player ever in his career. And in the finals, most notably, LeBron is on another level in that series, and that's even by his standards. But Kyrie's out after game 1, and Kevin Love doesn't play the series at all. It's like, asterisk next to the Warriors title. No, they won the title. They won the title. They were down 2-1 in 2 of their series, won both. They won the title fair and square. They were the best team. I sense a little, now this is to a greater degree with Boston, because literally the best player in every team the Celtics have played has been out. But we've been asking Tatum, we've been asking Brown, and they're going to come up against a big-time challenge in the NBA Finals. If they deliver, I think we should give them their credit. And I think, too, with Jason Tatum, who I've defended constantly on the show, again, a lot of this is expectations, projections, whatever it may be. But Jason Tatum, man, he'll never be in the discussion for best player in the NBA. Oh, okay. Is that supposed to be a bad thing? That's okay. Kyrie Irving has never at any point in his career been like, hey, that's the best player in basketball. No, but he's might be about to be a 2-time champion in 2 to 3 weeks. Like, it's not a knock on a guy if he's never been considered that. Okay. It's funny, again, this isn't carving up the context, but it's funny when you take a step back and look at the entirety of a situation. We view Jason, I shouldn't say we. I think the general public views Jason Tatum as the best player on a great team. And what I mean by that is he just plays his role. He gets his buckets. He scores his 25 to 30. He does what he needs to do. And everybody just kind of plays a role like a well-oiled machine. That's true, but also kind of not. And what I mean by that is, we can show the graphic right here. Tatum has literally been the Celtics' best player at basically everything. We can show you the numbers. He leads the Celtics this year in the playoff in points, rebounds, assists, free throw makes, and minutes. So shouldering the most load physically. He's scoring the most points. No surprise there. But he's leading them in assists. Derek White isn't. Jalen Brett. Jason Tatum is. He's getting double-digit boards. He's averaging a double-double a game in the playoffs. And he's getting to the line and knocking out his free throws. It's something. We didn't punish players when Michael or LeBron or guys like that in the past would lead their teams in all those categories, which Michael usually didn't. It was usually Scotty who took everything aside from scoring. But when these great players have led their team, Jokic last year. Now, Tatum's not Jokic, but when they have led their teams across the board in these statistical categories, it's something. It matters on a very good team, on an excellent team, which Boston clearly is. So I think if they, again, even if the Celtics lose the finals, should we think a little less of Boston? Maybe, because it's like, hey, you were handed the easiest path to the finals, maybe in NBA history, and you couldn't get the job done. will I think less of, I mean, we got to see how Tatum plays, but will I think, assuming he plays well, what he's been doing, if Tatum plays poorly, will I be like, yep, see, can't win with Tatum? Well, that would mean Tatum would have lost 2 finals to Steph Curry and Luka Doncic. I don't think that's like the worst thing in the world ever. You know, it's kind of like how we look at some of those great players in Jordan's day. Barkley, yeah, he's great, but he never got a ring. Yeah, because he ran into Michael. He wasn't as good as Michael. So, again, nuance. And, again, if Boston wins the title, I don't want to hear about their playoff run. They won the title. You've been asking them to win the title, and they won it. If they don't, it's, gosh darn it, man. You're giving a beat-up Heat team, a beat-up Cavs team, and a beat-up Pacers team, all of which you were better than from the jump when those teams were healthy. You can't win the title with that. Like, dang, you ever going to win a title? I don't know. Nuance. Context. It's not carving up the context, but it matters. Let's see what we have in here. Patrick. Boston will find a way to fan out. Porzingis' injury is better than most think. Oh, I think it's a huge injury. Listen, the size he brings to the table, the way he spaces the floor, yeah, it's a massive injury. And they need him desperately to come back for the finals. Jeff, totally agree with the Celtics take. They have to get it done this year. I don't think they will, unfortunately. And he says, Bryson, I don't even know if we say that about Tatum and Brown, and sometimes even Derek White is the Celtics' best player, especially in the fourth quarter of this playoff series. Tatum's been getting saved by Brown multiple times in this series. Game 1, definitely. Definitely in game 1, where Brown hits the tying shot where the Pacers should have fouled. I'm a firm believer, man. When you're up 3, to me, the cutoff is 3 seconds. If there's 3 seconds, I'm like, I'm not going to risk fouling a 3-point shooter. But I firmly believe do not let them get up a 3. The Pacers did, and it cost them that game. And people say, well, Tatum went off in overtime. Sure, but Tatum's fourth quarter numbers would have been atrocious. They still were atrocious because they won in overtime if Brown doesn't hit that shot. That said, I thought Tatum in the fourth quarter of that game the other night, if we could pull up his numbers against the Pacers, were tremendous. And you could say, well, the Celtics were down by a lot. Yeah, sure, but we've seen this throughout NBA history, even in the playoffs, where teams missing their best player, the other team doesn't take them seriously. That to me has been the fatal flaw of Boston in the past. It's why they've been barely above average at home in the playoffs. Is they always play to their competition. Listen, if it's the Heat without Jimmy Butler, doesn't matter. The Heat can go on a crazy hot shooting stretch in game 2 and steal a game in Boston. Whereas on the road, hey, you got to bring your A game on the road, man. You got to show up, and they do. But listen, Tatum dropped 36, 10, and 8, 12 of 23 shooting, 5 for 10 from 3. Like, I don't know what more if you're asking him to be Luka or Jokic, you're not going to get that because he's not those guys. But is he on the tier 2 of superstars? Yeah, I think so. Tier 1 is Jokic, Luka, Giannis, and I think it kind of ends there. Tier 2 is like Steph. I'm sorry, I still think LeBron's in that category. He's still amazing. He averaged 25, 8, and 7. What do you want me to do? LeBron. It's really hard for me to put Embiid in there because the man's never won a second-round playoff series. And I think you have to put Tatum in there. I mean, Kevin Durant, sure, you can make the case. I think you have to put him in that class. We talk about, Tatum's not clutch. Well, he hasn't been clutch this year, but last year in the playoffs was horrible against the Sixers in Game 6 until the fourth quarter when he goes berserk from 3, saves the Celtics, wins that game, and they end up winning Game 7 where he drops 50. He had the big game against Giannis when the Bucks were the defending champs in 2022 in Game 6 on the road. Goes for, I think it was 46, plays great. So, I think Tatum is one of the more over-criticized superstars in the game. I disagree with that, Jeff. I like Tatum, but he's not a top 10 player, and we've seen throughout history there haven't been many teams to win a championship without that. Yes, but I think you're wrong on him not being a top 10 player. I mean, it's kind of like, again, that's why I compare Tatum to Dak Prescott. It's like, okay, name the 10 that are better than Dak. Like, you're like, he's not, then name them. Name the 10 that are better, not even just better than Tatum. Just name 10 players not named Jason Tatum. Let's just look at the teams. Okay, obviously Jokic, Luka, absolutely better. Giannis is better. There's no question about that. Looking down the list at the Eastern Conference, I'm sorry, Embiid's not better. I'm sorry. The guy can't. The guy consistently. I've always said Embiid is who we think Tatum is. Where, this great regular season player who gags in the playoffs. No, Tatum's actually been better. I did a whole segment on this. Tatum is amazing in elimination games, amazing in game 7s, amazing in closeout games. Embiid's awful in all 3. So he's better. I'm taking him over Embiid any day of the week. Looking down the list here. Okay, let's look at the West. So I've got 3 players, right? That I think are better than Tatum. Let's see. Ant's not better than Tatum. I can't do that. KD, I don't know. LeBron, I would put over Tatum. Steph, I'd put over Tatum. I think my list ends right there. He's better than Kawhi. I would take him over AD right now because I get him more consistent offensive play out of Tatum than I do Anthony Davis. I don't know. I'm looking. I mean, Wemby will be there. He's not there yet. Shea, Shea's amazing, but he's a little one-dimensional where he's a little reliant on the whistle. I think he'll adjust as time goes on, but it kind of cost the Thunder in that playoff series, so that's kind of where the list ends for me. I love Brunson. I think Brunson's probably top 10. Jeff, Luka, Jokic, Giannis, Steph, LeBron, AD, Embiid, Brunson, Ant, KD, Kawhi. Kawhi's not better than Tatum. I cannot do Kawhi Leonard. Because part of, to me, what adds the best player in the world or the top 10 discussions is, man, are you there when I need you? Tatum usually is. Historically, Jason Tatum, Kawhi's not. Take away one playoff run in 2019, he's not. Physically, by the way. And even when he is there physically, 2020 blows a 3-1 lead to the Nuggets when holding a double-digit lead in all 3 games. I don't know. And especially, too, if the Celtics win a championship, then we're going to have to really start having some conversations. Okay, now what do we do with Tatum? There's the 3 that are undeniably better, at least in my estimation. Jokic, Luka, Giannis. I think those are absolutely the 3 best players in the world, no question about it. But then we discuss, I can't put him over Steph yet. We saw them play in the finals. LeBron, right now, we're not talking about all time, obviously, but right now, it's a discussion. And I think LeBron's the greatest player ever. I'm no LeBron hater over here. Anyways, but bottom line, if the Celtics want to win the title, give them their due respect. If they don't, yeah, we're gonna have to have some honest conversations about whether this is going to work. Last comment about this, and then I'll move on to the whole Kyrie Luka backcourt thing. Embiid has been hurt, so you can't knock him for the playoffs. We know he's that guy. Come on, dude's unstoppable. Yeah, he's unstoppable in the regular season. The thing is, Jeff, and I talked about this in the first round, is we've never seen Embiid healthy in the playoffs. And so I have to judge him for that. Luka's beat up this year. Steph was beat up in 2016 and 2022 and 2019. We've crushed Steph in the past when he's not played well, in part due to injury. Luka's had some bad games this year in the play. Not many, but he had a couple stinkers against Oklahoma City. We crushed him for it. All of a sudden, we can't do that for Joel Embiid. At some point, if you are constantly injured, it's part of your reality. It's how we view Kawhi. It's how we view a lot of stars who aren't there, when you absolutely need them the most. That's becoming the narrative. I don't think it's going to totally get there, but that's becoming the narrative with Joe Burrow, where we all know what Joe Burrow can do when he's healthy, but man, we need you to be there. So if I've never seen him be healthy in the playoffs for a decade, I have to judge him off what I constantly see. And by the way, Embiid dropped 50 this year in the playoffs against the Knicks. So he can still play, but it's the fourth quarters where he's been horrible. I mean, I did multiple segments on that. All right, moving on now. So I want to preface what I'm about to say by saying this. I love Stan Van Gundy. I just do. I think both Van Gundy brothers, I think, are excellent broadcasters. I think ABC and ESPN made a huge mistake moving on from Jeff Van Gundy and certainly my man, Mark Jackson. Love Mark Jackson. I think they made it. And by the way, JJ Redick and Doris Burke do a really good job. JJ may not even be there because he's probably about to take the Lakers job, but nonetheless. So I love Stan Van Gundy. I think he does a great job on TNT. And by the way, Stan's been through a lot. Man, that's putting it mildly. Over the last 9 months or so, his wife passed away last summer. So he's been through a lot, and he's talked about that publicly. So I love the man. But he's tripping on something. So before game 1 or 2, I forget, it was one of the first 2 games of the series of the conference finals, Dallas, Minnesota, he says that Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving might be the best offensive backcourt of all time. Excuse me. And others have said, well, if we're talking about skill, just pure skill, they probably are. In that regard, that's a legitimate conversation. Those shots, Luka, by the way, Luka and Kyrie were hitting last night were stupid. Guys are playing perfect defense and they're switching these. Nothing but net. It's unbelievable. They're awesome. And by the way, I think if they win a title, Luka and Kyrie probably is a top 5 or 6 backcourt ever. At least offensive backcourt. You talk about West, Gail Goodrich. You're talking about Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, although defense kind of factored into their greatness as just as much as offense did. Think again, you could argue Kobe and Derek Fisher, but Derek Fisher's not a Hall of Famer the way, again, that's to me where I struggle with that one. They're not above Steph and Clay. And I'm not saying this is a Warriors fan. I'm saying this is an NBA fan. I think part of why some may view it that way, Luka and Kyrie, because are Luka and Kyrie a better duo today than Steph and Clay? No question. No question. Luka, I would put above Steph, as great as Steph still is, and I think he's still awesome. I still think he's a top 5 player in the world. Luka's better than him today. And Kyrie's certainly better than Clay. Nobody would argue that. But are we just going to throw... We know what Steph's resume is. I don't think anybody is in these discussions arguing Steph's resume versus Luka's resume, or even just Steph's all-time greatness. We argue about where he is in the all-time list. Nobody argues he's one of the greatest players who ever lived. He's the second best player, in my opinion, the third best player of the 21st century behind LeBron and Kobe Bryant. It's, I think, Clay versus Kyrie where we're like, listen, man. So Kyrie's made the All-Star game more times than Clay, but has only been All-NBA one more time than Klay Thompson. We also recognize the fact that, again, as a shooting backcourt, they went to, 6 finals. That's got to matter. It's got to matter that in 2016, one of those finals appearances, the 73-9 year, of course, they lost the Cavs in the finals. But there was a game 6 against the Oklahoma City Thunder that maybe some of my younger audience may not know or remember, that might have literally shifted the balance of NBA history at least for 5 years or more. Game 6 in Oklahoma City. The Golden State Warriors trail 3-2. The Thunder, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, prime KD and Russ are a win away from the NBA Finals, and the Warriors are on the brink on the road in a building where they got crushed the first 2 games on the road in that series. If you look at Steph's stat line, it will tell you, if off the top of my head, 30, 10, and 9. Steph was great in that game, mostly in the fourth quarter. They do not win that game if Klay Thompson does not drop, 41 and break the single game playoff record for playoff threes. That's where game 6 Klay was born. And if he doesn't do that, with Steph, by the way, again, they win game 6, they go on to win game 7 at home. Again, obviously they lost the finals. If Klay does not drop 41 points, does not break what was at the time the record for playoff threes in a game, hits the go-ahead shot with under 2 minutes left, does Kevin Durant go to Golden State? And if Kevin Durant doesn't go to Golden State, how many rings has KD got? How many rings LeBron got? How many rings has Steph got? Does it look different than what it is? Well, it certainly looks different because KD and Steph won the rings together. So that game literally altered the balance of NBA history. And by the way, is the game where game 6 Klay was born. Could I remind you of a game 6 in 2019? The last team to repeat was the 2018 Golden State Warriors after winning the finals in 2017. The 17 Warriors, to me, is absolutely, without a doubt, the greatest basketball team ever assembled. Only the 0-1 Lakers could beat that team, in my estimation, in a 7-game series. But they're down 3-2 to Houston. In a game 6 at home, they trail by 17 points. Houston's completely outplaying them, outclassing them. I'm watching the game as a Warriors fan, like, oh my gosh, we may lose this series. And then Klay goes bananas throughout that game, drops 35. The Warriors go from being down 17 to winning by almost 30. Now, Steph was great. KD was great. Klay spearheaded it. How about game 6 of again, another game 6, 2019 NBA Finals. Golden State Warriors, once again, down 3-2, this time to the Toronto Raptors. I know I'm in the minority of this. That's fine. Everybody talks about, if KD was healthy for that series, the Warriors would have beaten the Raptors. Obviously. I go so far as to say if Klay Thompson is healthy from start to finish, Golden State beats Toronto, because people forget Klay didn't play game 3 of that series. But let's talk about what Klay did when he was on the floor. Oh, I don't know. He led the Warriors in scoring in their 2 finals wins in that series. And in game 6, Golden State, Toronto, back and forth, push and pull. Nobody can separate. And in that third quarter, Clay's starting to go off to the point where when he tears his ACL and leaves with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, with 14 minutes left of basketball to play, he has 30. Might have been on his way to winning finals MVP. That's Klay Thompson. He's a no doubt, not to say Kyrie isn't a no doubt first ballot Hall of Famer. Klay certainly is. Klay, no question about it. And so, again, there's nothing wrong with giving players flowers while they're doing what they're doing, which we should be. Luka and Kyrie are the best duo right now, I think, in basketball. I think that's a fair take to have. They're not the greatest. I mean, listen, if they rail off 3 championships, could they be? Sure. I don't know if they will just because of Kyrie's age, but could they? Yeah. Yeah, it may become a discussion, but at the same time, oh, you made 3 finals. That's cute. We made 6 as a duo, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. And oh, by the way, Steph's certainly the greatest shooter ever. We might be the 2 greatest in the history of what we do. I don't know, you say about Luka or Kyrie? Steph and Klay when it comes to obviously shooting the basketball. If Klay isn't second, he's at least third, no lower than 4th all-time and when it comes to the all-time great 3-point shooters. So, I love Stan Van Gundy. That's my guy, but that was not one of his finer takes. Listen, pure skill, sure. Kyrie's absolutely more skilled than Klay, and I love Klay. Luka, Steph, I would probably go Steph, but you could argue Luka. As far as overall accomplishments, it's not even a contest. And that's not even a shot at Luka and Kyrie. That's an elevation of Steph and Klay, who are clearly and obviously the greatest backcourt ever assembled. So, love SVG, but come on now. No, sir. Let's see. John Rivera, Fan Perspective Podcast. What's up, John? It's close, but Steph and Klay are better in their prime. Magic Johnson, Steph and Klay, Magic and Michael Cooper, Isaiah and Joe, Luke and Kyrie round out my list. Okay. I think you have to include Jerry West and Gail Goodrich. Like, I think maybe that's because it's before the merger, and Jerry West to me is one of the 15 best players ever. Gail Goodrich was a darn good player if you look at his numbers back in the day. But that's not a bad list, Patrick. John, better team ball on a talent level, I'll give it to Luke and Kyrie. I get that. I totally get that. Listen, I've been critical of Kyrie in the past, gave him his flowers today in terms of his maturity. I have never, ever questioned Kyrie's ability. I as the biggest Steph Curry fan in the world, Kyrie's got the greatest handle I've ever seen in my life. It's crazy. So from a skill, Kyrie's certainly more skilled than Klay. Steph and Luka, it's at least a toss-up. So the tiebreaker goes to Kyrie being more skilled than Klay. So that's a fair take. If you want to just argue pure skill, sure. As far as just who's better historically, it's not even close. Bookie Allen is in the comments. He says the 86 Celtics will smash the 2017 Warriors. The 87 Lakers will smash the Warriors. Y'all are overrated because they whooped LeBron. Okay, so listen, the 86 Celtics to me are one of the 5 best teams ever. There's no question about that. To me, the greatest teams ever. 7 in no order. Would say no order. 17 Warriors, 96 Bulls. I think it was the 83 Sixers, 01 Lakers, 86 Celtics. Those to me, you can argue 69 Lakers. You can make that case. I'm trying to think of any more potentially off the top of my head. I can't right now. Yeah, 87. The 87 Lakers would not beat the Warriors. Because the case I've always made, it's like, oh, if you put the Warriors in the more physical era. Okay, maybe it affects Kevin Durant because physicality has bothered KD in the past. What are you going to do about a guy who pulls from 35? Well, we're going to push up on him. Then he's going to roll right by you. It's kind of the case I made with the 96 Bulls, 17 Warriors. There's one offensive threat the Warriors have to worry about, and it's Michael Jordan. Okay, Scottie can get his. You have, obviously you have Steve Curry, you have Tony Kukoc, you have some good perimeter players. But if you go all out to stop KD, well, then you have Steph, and then you have Klay, and Draymond's going to get guys involved, and Iguodala's off the bench. He can give you – Iguodala had 20 in the closeout game to win the finals. I think again, the 96 Bulls, people are like, oh, they never saw a Game 7. That's cute. The Warriors saw one Game 5. Just think about that. Now, again, the 01 Lakers, the only other team, to my knowledge, that actually, I think the 83 Sixers could say that's why I've got them so high, because I think Dr. J, we know who he is, but I think Moses Malone's the most underrated player ever. I will stand on that. In the modern era, 0-1 Lakers, I think, are the only team outside the 83 Sixers to only lose one game the whole playoffs. Shaq would have been a monster to stop for the Warriors. I don't know what they would have done. So that's the only team I think could beat them in a 7-game series. So yeah, that's what I got, because I think it's we forget how crazy dominant the 17 Warriors were. You took a 73-9 team with the second best player in the world, Steph Curry, and added the third best player in the world in Kevin Durant. Like, that's not fair. It was a foregone conclusion who was going to win that finals and the next one, frankly, even though it got a little dicey against Houston. Bookie Allen says, Tatum and Brown are the best duo in the league. They both play defense. Yes, and again, you can make that case, but at the same time, I love Tatum. He's not Steph. And Brown and Clay, it's a discussion, but Clay knows. But we see the 60-point game on 11 dribbles. Clay knows I'm not going to get most of my shots off the dribble. Jaylen Brown, again, I know it gets memed and people are like, it can't be that bad. Jaylen Brown's left hand, it's gotten better, but it's not great. Jeff, Curry and Clay is a top 3 duo of all time. Okay. And the best backcourt easily. So Shaq and Kobe to me are the best duo of all time. It's Jordan Pippen certainly is there. I literally did a list on this years ago. Steph and KD was actually in my list, because Steph and KD, like we think about Steph and Clay as the duo, Splash Brothers, but like the Steph KD Warriors were literally unstoppable. Bookie, the Warriors can't small Kareem. The Warriors, are too small. Kareem will destroy Draymond in the post, and Worthy will destroy them in the post. So the thing with if we're talking about the 87 Lakers, that's an older Kareem. That's an older Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And I don't think they would have put Draymond on Kareem. They probably would have put KD. Now, is Kareem going to get his? Yeah, he's the third greatest player ever. He's going to get his. But here's my question. What are you going to do to stop Steph and KD and Clay and the offensive perimeter threats? Now I think Worthy's awesome. That would have been this last thing I'll say, and then I'll move to Caitlin Clark. That to me, because series are all about matchups. Like, the Nuggets might very well beat the Mavericks in a 7-game series, but the Timberwolves matched up better against the Nuggets. That's why the Timberwolves are here. Is that the reason I am dogged on the 96 Bulls absolutely do not beat the 17 Warriors is because a lot of what made that team great, they were an awesome offensive team, don't get me wrong, but their defense was freakishly good. Yeah, they never faced a team with this offensively skilled. So if the offense is a wash, okay, but the defense, the Warriors play LeBron James in the finals. He averaged a 33-point triple-double, if I'm not mistaken. So Jordan would have gotten his, just like LeBron did. But Kyrie, up and down series. Kevin Love was good in spurts, bad in spurts. So that matchup would have favored the Warriors. Now, the 87 Lakers, because of the offensive threats, Worthy, Kareem, Magic, it's a discussion, but I still think the Warriors take that. Again, the crappy thing is we'll never know. That's why these debates are really fun. But all that to say, Steph and Clay are a better backcourt all time than Luka and Kyrie. Like, come on now. Next up, though, I did want to discuss this because it was a story last week. I didn't really get a chance to touch on it because I was out of town. I only did the one show, so I didn't really have a chance to really discuss it at length. So I think it goes without saying that Caitlin Clark is one of the more hyped athletes coming into her professional sport. And listen, I've been as big of a Caitlin Clark fan as anybody. You can go check the footage. But obviously she enters the WNBA, and there's been, I don't want to even say pushback. I know you had the Taurasi comment, which this is on me. This is on me for taking Taurasi's comments when Diana Taurasi during the Final Four, when her and Sue Bird were doing the broadcast, when she was like, yeah, she's great now, but she's going to, it's going to be different going against grown women, which I agree with to a certain degree. She's not going to come in dropping 30. Like, that's not a fair expectation of her for her rookie year. But Taurasi would later, or said almost immediately after that, she said something like, but she'll eventually adjust. So that's on me for kind of being a part of the masses, taking that out of context. So my apologies to the great Diana Taurasi, who might be the greatest player ever. So I got Maya Moore. But how do I even go into this? So Caitlin she's gotten pushback from contemporaries, from fans about maybe, I don't know what it is necessarily, being overhyped. It's strange. And you've had people like Becky Hammon, who coaches the back-to-back champ Las Vegas Aces, the best player in the world in my estimation, and A'ja Wilson, absolutely best player in the world, should have won MVP last year, who pushed back along with her coach like, hey, nobody's hating her. We're, saying that we're competitive and going after her is not hating on her. Yes, but I don't think that's what people said they were hating on her for, or hating on the league for, other people for hating. It's okay. So there was an article written recently. Was it in the Atlantic? I think it was in the Atlantic. I want to make sure I'm getting this right. No, the LA Times. My bad. Written by Jemele Hill, who, as we know, worked at ESPN, was, in my opinion, fired unjustly by ESPN. Should have never lost her job. It was ridiculous. But again, people know Jemele is tends to lean left, is very outspoken about social justice issues. I think there's things she said I'm like 1,000% agree, and things she said I'm like, I think you missed on this one. This is one of those. This one falls in the latter category. So Jemele Hill was talking about in the article. I think this has kind of been what's part of what sums up the pushback on Caitlin. So Jemele wrote an article in the LA Times. I want to make sure I get this quote right. People love Steph Curry because he's the everyman. Caitlin Clark has the same relatability. We would all be very naive if we didn't say race and her sexuality played a role in her popularity. While so many people are happy for Caitlin's success, including the players, this has had such an enormous impact on the game. There is a part of it that is a little problematic because of what it says about the worth and the marketability, and the marketability of the players who are already there. So the last part I kind of agree with, that the WNBA has always had stars. Like I think the quote unquote hate on Caitlin, like, oh, you're not stepping up. Well, part of it is to go back to what Taurasi said. People underestimate how good these players are. Like, this isn't just, the WNBA isn't a slightly better version of college. The WNBA is like literally every professional sport. NFL's way better than college. NBA's way better than college. It's just a fact. Major League Baseball. That's why people didn't factor that in to their assessment on what she was going to do her rookie year. I found that odd. Like, you got to remember those things. What Jemele said before that, though, and I want to pull up the quote again. We would all be very naive to say, we would all be very naive if we didn't say race and her sexuality played a role in her popularity. So there are instances where I think that actually does apply. And I have been, a lot of people, especially white people, aren't comfortable talking about race or scared to talk about race. I'm the exact opposite. I'm the guy who, and again, I'm not one of those, these people like, oh, everything's racism. No. Because I think the far left screws up with that a lot. But I am somebody who, when I see it, I'm like, hey, time out. When Angel Reese, remember last year, Angel Reese, God forbid, does the celebration to Caitlin that Caitlin literally did in the Elite Eight, and then points to her ring finger, which Joe Burrow's done, Steph Curry's done, Aaron Donald's done, Michael Jordan's done, everybody's done it. And got all this backlash, and even, this isn't even just a going at the right. The left even came at her like, oh my gosh, how dare, like, this is freaking racism. Are you kidding me? You had no issue with Caitlin doing it, but when Angel does, oh my gosh. So I've always been the guy to call out that kind of stuff when it happens. Always. I simply don't think it applies here. Because I think if Caitlin was, Jemele used Steph Curry as an example. Like, because again, first of all, the similarities in their game, it's hard to not see it. But Steph Curry is black. Now, I know he's light-skinned, and that, creates some conversations. People get up in arms about that. But Steph Curry is a black man in America. That's what people see him as. That's what he is. I think if Caitlin was the complexion of an Angel Reese, of a Camila Cardoso, of a Maya Moore, who's her idol, do I think that she would have this level of attention with her game? I do. I think if you have an individual who is the all-time leading scorer in the history of, and again, here's the thing. She's the all-time leading scorer in the history of men's and women's college basketball. How you do it matters. It just does. Tim Duncan is far and away the greatest power forward ever. Tim Duncan is, in my mind, the 6th greatest basketball player who ever lived. You will have folks that I vehemently disagree with, by the way, that will put Larry Bird or Shaq or Wilt or Hakeem above Tim Duncan, and the resume simply says otherwise. But Tim Duncan was not an interesting player to watch. They literally called him the Big Fundamental. Literally, that was his nickname. You know, but a Kobe Bryant, a LeBron, and MJ, those guys were more entertaining to watch. Now, again, guys like Bird who were more entertaining, Shaq and Hakeem, they were more entertaining. They weren't more interesting. If Caitlin was a center, if she played the position of an Asia Wilson, of a Brittany Griner, of a Breanna Stewart, some of her contemporaries, some of the best players in the WNBA, and she became the all-time leading scorer with twos, mid-range jumpers, and free throws, I don't think she's interesting. She's still probably the number 1 pick, but she's not, beating college football ratings, beating NBA ratings, certainly Major League Baseball. She's not doing that. It's how she did it. It's not just her accomplishments. It's the fact she could pull from 30, 35 feet, and we think, we're shocked when it doesn't go in. It's the fact that she can get her teammates set up with poise and precision. Folks, she's 4th in the WNBA in assists. So that part is translated immediately. It's the fact that she's got the attitude. Now, if she was black and had that attitude, there might be pushback. Matter of fact, we saw Angel Reese. We literally saw it. Would that factor in? Probably. As far as her game in totality, though, that's where I break. And that's where I find a lot of the pushback from other great WNBA players a little jealous. And it's not even their fault. I don't even blame them. Because from their perspective, hey, Caitlin never got a championship in college. Asia Wilson's like, I got a championship in college at South Carolina. Breanna Stewart's like, man, I did nothing but get championships at UConn. Literally. I don't know if Breanna Stewart lost more than 1 or 2 games in college. So I understand that from the perspective of the play. Diana Taurasi says, you got to be like, I'm the all-time leading scorer in WNBA history. I get it. But it is the fact that, by the way, Caitlin has been the face of, but has also helped, taken advantage of, to a certain degree, the slow climb and build and rise of women's basketball. Because Caitlin Clark's not the only great player we saw last year. Cameron Brink, who's leading the WNBA in blocks now. Angel Reese, Camila Cardoso. We saw Paige Beckers, who's going to be the number 1 pick next year. Juju Watkins, I freaking love, out of USC. So this is a wave. This isn't just Caitlin Clark. It's a wave of players. But it's, at least from my mind's eye, intellectually dishonest to ignore the fact that her game's more fun to watch than all of them. Because for the same reason that people were goo-goo and gagaing, myself included, over Steph Curry when he was in the midst of his rise to dominance in the NBA. Even back in his days at Davidson, it was like, who's this kid? Who's this skinny dude from who's Davidson? I was more known than Davidson, but I was not exactly UConn or South Carolina or Stanford. Iowa. She's taking Iowa to the... And so I think there's a lot of factors that play into the pushback towards Caitlin Clark. I don't think race is a reason that she is perceived as like the face of the WNBA. Now, should Asia Wilson be the face? Yeah, she probably should be. She's the best player. Breanna Stewart has a case. There's a lot of other great... Sabrina Ionescu, who I've been a fan of since Oregon. There's been plenty of players. Diana Taurasi probably was that for a long time. But do I think that if she were, again, the complexion of an Asia Wilson, that it would hurt her marketability? I think there are instances where you've seen that be true. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think this applies. I don't. So Again, it's a reasonable conversation to have. Again, there are situations, like I said, we literally saw it last year with Angel Reese being exactly identically as demonstrative as Caitlyn is, and the whole world comes after her when they didn't with Caitlyn. And so that applies. I'm like, that's a black girl, white girl, both do the same thing. They go after the black girl. My guess is that's probably racism. I've never been a guy to shy away from that, because it absolutely unequivocally applies in a lot of his situations, unfortunately, still in professional sports. This is not one of the areas where I think it does. That's just where I see it. Could be wrong, but from above, that's where I see it. So there you go. That's my take on Caitlin Clark. And again, like I said, I'm not even just doing this to bash Jamel Hill, because listen, when you're a person in her position, because I kind of do this on my show where I have now hers is more in politics, which we know is more inflammatory by definition. But you know, as a guy who does have big boisterous takes, backs them up with fact, at least to the best of my ability, and gets pushback, like I understand that. And again, like I said earlier, she should have not been fired by ESPN. And by the way, I say that as not as an independent who leans left socially. I say that as a guy who said first of all, she's kind of correct in what she said. History bears it out. But also, again, it's why I said on Twitter, I didn't get a chance to talk about Harrison Butker. I'll briefly summarize it. Did I vibe? And by the way, as a Christian, did I vibe with a lot of what he said? I vibe with just about none of it. But should he lose his job? No, he should not lose his job. Just like Kaepernick, by the way, should not have lost his job. So, listen, I wouldn't say I'm a free speech absolutist, but I'm close. Like, my thing is, unless you are, I think this is it's in our law in the United States. Like, unless hate speech leads to violence, I think that's in our law. It seems like I remember learning that. You're good. Like, they can't put you in jail. Can't put you in prison. That's what makes this country great. That's why we commemorate days like today, Memorial Day. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at on that. So, anywho's it. Let's move on to what do we got last? Oh, yes, no question. So, before we get out of here, I did want to mention the fact that we got some sad news out of the NBA this afternoon, that Bill Walton passed away. Bill Walton was 71 years old. Apparently, he had been dealing with cancer, which cancer is the freaking worst, man. It's awful. But Bill Walton passed today, and so we've seen a lot of tributes from colleagues at ESPN, from former teammates. And I kind of wanted to, again, obviously I didn't know Bill Walton, but I wanted to touch on kind of the two things that he's known best for as a player and as a broadcaster. So as a player, I'll circle back to his college career. I'll start with his NBA career. So his regular season numbers, I think he averaged like 13 points per game the regular season of his career. Like, they're not mind-boggling stats, but he is, for what it's worth, first of all, he's an MVP. And he's the only guy in NBA history ever to have an MVP, a finals MVP, and a Sixth Man of the Year award on his resume. Only guy in NBA history who can say that, because he won the MVP with the Blazers in, I think it was 76, 77, won a title the year before that with Portland. It's the most recent title that the Portland Trail Blazers have ever gotten to my recollection. So you have that. But also, because of the injuries, and Bill Walton was on his way to being one of the greatest players ever. He still was. But top 20 ever. Maybe top 10 ever. Who knows? If not for the injuries that really, really hampered his career. But he's on the 86 Celtics as the sixth man, wins Sixth Man of the Year. Again, the 86 Celtics, one of the greatest teams ever. And so it's a credit to him that while injury sapped what could have been in terms of his prime years, he was still able to be a massive contributor on another championship team. And of course, he won 2 championships as a player. As far as his college career at UCLA, I'm of the belief that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Lou Alcindor, who's now Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, is absolutely the greatest college basketball player ever. But if you don't think Kareem is the greatest college basketball player ever, you can't say anybody else other than Bill Walton. You can't. So look at his resume in college. It's crazy, okay? Do we have this here? Okay. Bill Walton in his college career, first of all, his numbers, He averaged, can we pull this up? So all of a sudden my phone's lagging. Okay. All of a sudden, Bill Walton averaged in his college career 20, 15, and 5 on 64% shooting. That in and of itself is like, whoa, timeout. Those numbers jump off the screen, especially for a college player. But in his college career, okay, he won 2 championships. He was twice the NCAA, the Final Four most outstanding player. He was not once, not twice, but 3 times named the National College Player of the Year. And obviously his number 32, by the way, 3-time consensus first-team All-American, and he has his number 32 retired by the UCLA Bruins. And I think I saw this today, and I can't believe this. I want to make sure I'm getting this right. From midway through his junior year of high school till I think it was midway through his junior year of UCLA, junior or senior year, he didn't lose a game. Like, the man went basically a half decade without losing a basketball game. So if Lou Alcindor isn't the GOAT in college basketball, then Bill Walton is. Either way, UCLA boasts the greatest player ever in the history of men's college basketball. So that's his playing career. His broadcasting career is what people my generation know him for, because obviously I wasn't around in the 70s and 80s to watch him play. So I live on the East Coast. I'm an SEC guy, go Vols. But anytime I have, I mean, ever since I've watched college basketball, anytime I've been up late, and I mean like up really late, either working on a homework assignment or my Vols just got done playing, or I don't know, the Warriors game is a blowout, which back in the day, the Warriors were smoking a lot of teams. I'd turn over to ESPN and watch the Pac-12 game, which the Pac-12 obviously now basically no longer in existence, to listen to Dave Pasch and Bill Walton calling games. And obviously early in the season, they'd have these tournaments in Hawaii that Bill Walton would call with the lei around his neck and all that. And I just want to read, because he also did NBA games, but I remember more for college games. And he was great because he was funny. He was energetic. You weren't quite sure what Bill Walton was going to say next. But I didn't want to talk about this. So during the 05-06 season, this was back when he still broadcasted NBA games, Boris Diaw, I think we all remember Boris Diaw. He's a really nice player. But Boris Diaw played for the Phoenix Suns at this point in time, 05-06. And Bill Walton was calling a Suns game that Boris Diaw was playing in. And I'm not kidding. Bill Walton's cultural knowledge, I think he was a huge Grateful Dead fan. His cultural knowledge, his basketball knowledge would oftentimes merge in the middle of broadcast. And this is a prime example. I pulled this quote from Courtside Buzz. They're a great follow on IG. I highly recommend them. And this was his quote about Boris Diaw. You talk to Boris Diaw, what a classical human being he is. It was 201 years ago today that Beethoven's Symphony No. 3 in E-flat escorted in the age of romanticism in music. When I look at Boris Diaw, I think of Beethoven in the age of the Romantics. That's Bill Walton. That's who he was as a broadcaster. He mixed. Oftentimes it was music, like 1970s music, or in this case Beethoven. Long time ago, classical music with basketball, and those were his two biggest loves that he merged together. People who knew him, whether it was broadcast partners, whether it was even current NBA players. You're seeing. I saw Steph Curry paid tribute to him today. Have talked about man, he was just a blast to be around, and he just loved life. Anytime you saw Bill Walton anywhere, he always had a big old smile on his face, and that is amplified to me more today now that we know he was battling the illness he was battling, and it's still 71. It still feels too young. I mean, I know he wasn't. When Kobe Bryant passed, he was 41 years old, so that's far, far too young. But even 71 still feels dang, still feels. It doesn't feel like he got everything out of maybe what we thought he could have gotten out. But at the end of the day, listen, he's one of the 75 greatest players in NBA history, as he was named 2 years ago for the 75th anniversary of the league. He's a finals MVP. He's an MVP. He's a Sixth Man of the Year award winner. He's a Hall of Famer. He is no lower. I've got Kareem as the college basketball GOAT. Bill Walton's no lower than second on that list. And so, man, listen, it's a huge loss to the basketball community. He will be missed. There's no question. And man, I'll tell you, it's going to suck watching games at 11:30 at night and Bill Walton is not in the call, giving you a good laugh before you go to bed on a Tuesday or Wednesday night watching a Pac-12 game. So rest in peace, Bill Walton. Thoughts and prayers go to his family, to his loved ones, and we're gonna miss him. There's no question about that. The whole basketball community will miss his joy, his energy, and what he brought to the game. So Bill Walton, 71 years old, passed away today, and will never be forgotten. There's no question about it. Look at the comments here. Excuse me. Yeah, thanks for bringing this up, Patrick, because I was going to touch on this at the end of my show. Matter of fact, I still will, so I'll put your comment up when I, end the show how I normally end it. But that is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by, as always. Be sure to catch Carving Up Live on Wednesday, where we're going to celebrate 1,000 subscribers on this show. Very excited about that. We'll pull out all the stops. I'm still trying to craft what we're going to do, but we're going to have some fun on Wednesday with, of course, some sports topics. The Celtics, I would think by then, will have clinched a spot in the finals. The Mavericks presumably as well. So we'll discuss that. Carving up the context, Bryson's best 10, the whole bit. Gonna have a fun show on Wednesday, so stay tuned for that. 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, right here on Twitter, as well as the Carving It Up YouTube channel and the Grid Network YouTube channel this Wednesday at 6 Eastern, 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 3 o'clock p.m. Pacific time. Of course, be sure to like, share, comment, and please take 2 seconds out of your day. Join the 1,000. Hit that big red subscribe button down there. It helps the channel grow exponentially. We've gotten to the 1,000 point total. What's the next goal? Let's do 5,000. All right, 5,000 is again, obviously it's a far greater goal to achieve than the 1,000. But listen, that's the next goal. 5K subscribers. The road to that begins today. So very excited to start on that journey. So if you haven't subscribed, hey, just takes a couple seconds. Hit that big red subscribe button down there, and boom, you're part of the Carving It Up family. If you have not subscribed, if you have subscribed, rather, hey, we appreciate you so much for it, for taking time out of your day to watch the show. Please tell your friends about it, your family about it, everybody know about it, except for your sleeping cat. Trust me from experience, that is never a good idea. You do not disturb a cat's slumber. As I know, that's often. Shout out Neelan. I love Neelan. It's my orange tabby cat, Neeland, after Neyland Stadium, Vols, orange. You get the picture. Also, just as important, be sure to go subscribe to the Grid Network. That is GRYD, the Grid Podcast Network, right here on YouTube, as well as any and everywhere you get your favorite podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, any and everywhere you get your favorite podcasts. You can find us at the Grid Network, where we dare to be different. All right, I will see y'all on Wednesday to celebrate 1,000 subscribers. Again, just want to take a moment to recognize and celebrate the amazing men and women who have given their lives to this country for the freedoms that we enjoy every day. So praying for the families and the loved ones of those. Listen, while we're all doing our barbecues and our cookouts and enjoying time as the unofficial kickoff of summer, obviously, certainly want to keep that in mind, what this day is really all about. So we will see you guys on Wednesday. Please be sure to stay safe out there. Please be sure to take care of your physical as well as your mental health. This is why I bring in your comment, Patrick, because you're certainly a somber way to end the show, but it's a necessary one. And I saw this news yesterday. Patrick Brown, golfer Grayson Murray, took his own life, 30 years old. Life is precious, and mental health illnesses are real. Please check on your loved ones and seek treatments. You are not alone in this battle. And you're 100% right. And Patrick talks about here, as a recovering mental health patient, it's a daily struggle. To all those watching and or listening, it's okay not to be okay. Your life matters. 1,000%, Patrick. And I second everything you said. And listen, it's terrible, devastating, tragic. All the words to what happened to Grayson Murray over the weekend. He had been dealing with mental health struggles over the years, and so yeah, Patrick said, check on everybody. Especially vets today. Like this is obviously Memorial Day. A lot of PTSD in that community for obvious reasons, and so definitely check on them and check on everybody today and every day. Because as Patrick said, it's okay not to be okay. And finally, be sure to contact your local state representatives and senators to demand change for gun violence in America. It's like I always say, it doesn't matter if you lean right, you lean left, you're right down the middle, dead center. This is an issue that impacts all Americans. No matter what anybody on either side tries to say and tries to gaslight you on, oh, this is not a problem. Oh, there's only one solution to the problem. Both are BS. Both are total lies that are fabricated for personal interest. This is a very nuanced issue that needs to be addressed ASAP. And so let's do what we got to do to to help solve this problem because it needs to be solved as soon as possible. All right, I will see y'all on Wednesday. 1,000 subscribers celebration. We'll see y'all then at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time on Twitter and on the Grid Network YouTube channel, Carving Up YouTube channel as well. We'll see you then. Stay safe out there. God bless y'all. Peace out. Don't you forget about what Steph and Clay did, man. Shout out to the Splash Brothers. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.